The denial of natural feelings leads to empathing in toxic ways. This was the message I received from the energy, the Christed energy that I refer to as Jesus, sometimes Yeshua. It was just so profound. I got this message in the morning before I had my tri-session client the other day, and it was yesterday. And I just sat with that in my morning meditation, and it reminded me of the last video that I made. I was talking about a personal story I wanted to share about how I was denying my own feelings and how um, it produced a lot of negativity and it attracted more negativity. It was the negativity was wanting to produce more of itself, and it was really taking up space in my life. And I shared in the last video the different ways that had shown up. And I was, over a 4 month period, just scratching the surface because there was really a lot of other things that this negativity was like an infection, but just because I was, denying myself of feeling how I really felt, and my ego was giving me all kinds of reasons to be stoic, et cetera, et cetera. So kind of piggybacking off of that, my client had an amazing session yesterday, her tri-session with me yesterday. A lot of it had to do with, she had a few things she wanted to work on, but the most, the main event for her was she wanted to change the pattern of being empathic to the point where, it was really causing a lot of self-isolation. And she had a really big fear of disappointing people and disrupting their comfort level, and just this intense fear of disappointing people that she pretty much carried for a very, very long time. She really wanted to find ways of getting around that and not experiencing herself like this anymore. And she'd really sat down with herself, she told me, and said there really must be another way. And of course, she came across my information, and she said it didn't take her long before she was pressing the contact me button. And I mean, that's how it works, right? When we're meant to work with the right people, it's not usually a lot of back and forth. It's usually pretty clear and straightforward that that person is the one that we should be working with. And I'm really glad that she reached out because, like all my other clients, there's always a shared learning lesson between the both of us. There's always because there needs to be an energetic match for us to be able to work well together. There were some learning lessons that she was learning in her life that I had also had to learn in my life, and was some of the things she talked about um, were things that I'm currently also working on. So we're both grandmothers, and we talked about our grandchildren, and it was really a beautiful session, and I feel really inspired to share this because I still feel like it's worthwhile talking about what happens when we deny our natural feelings. And sometimes the reasons behind why we do that is really important. So, helping her to access her intuitive mind, which she did so beautifully and naturally, um, the information, it was discovered that, she'd been with her husband. They'd been married for a very long time. And she had the only person that she could really express herself and speak her truth about was him when he would trigger her. And it was the same thing about having to feel like she needed to defend herself when she felt that she was being blamed for something and she had felt that it wasn't fair. Well, she had even admitted herself, Christine, at this point, I don't even think it's true. I think I'm, fabricating this. I just seem to be locked into this pattern. And I'd really like to do a deep dive and see if there's anything that can be done to disrupt this pattern and, experience myself in a different way because it was really starting to take over her life, not speaking her truth because she was afraid to disappoint people. This was the main event. Um, well, it was very interesting because what was discovered was that her soul had chosen that for a duration in her life because it was learning about compassion, and she needed to have this experience for a really long time to understand and to really know compassion and what it meant to be compassionate. And it was a real surrendering that took place because there had been a lot of intentions that had been set forth, prior to our working together, but there had been no surrendering. And I know from my own experience, the wisdom that comes through about that is when there's no surrendering involved or backing up an intention, it can really lead us on a path of delusion, and it can make more delusion. Like it just gets very delusionary. And that's fine because we use the lower forms of the higher forms of things. There's always a lower and higher form of everything. The lower forms of things is what we need to learn and grow. But we reach expiry dates. We sometimes we're there a little bit too long, or we're right on time and it's time to shift and go to a next tier on that path. And it was fascinating because I knew right away in my intuition, in my knowingness, and I got the same message internally, and then she got the same message. And of course, she's sharing it with me. So it's like, mm-hmm, uh-huh, right? Like I was able to confirm with my own spidey senses the same thing. We were being given the same message because we were having the same journey when it comes to being an empath. She just prior, just it was just getting so toxic. She was just carrying everyone's stuff, the toxic empath experience. And she was just like done. So it was very fascinating to find out that she was exactly where she needed to be. She needed to have these experiences with her husband where he would trigger her, and it would have to happen over and over again. It was very important because it was the only platform, it was the only environment where she actually would stand up for herself and speak her truth. And without that outlet, it could have been very, very difficult in the life. Things could have gotten much more difficult. Um, the wisdom within me had further explained uh, as an idea of what can happen to us um, when we find ourselves in these circumstances in our growth and learning. So it was absolutely fine that she had been having these triggering experiences because it really was a beautiful thing for her to be able to speak her truth. And the only thing was that she was just tired of it, because she'd kind of caught on to herself that, I don't even think it's true, but it invokes this within me. And so, he wasn't necessarily blaming her, but her ability or her choice to be taking on that's not fair and speaking up for herself was exactly what she needed. Exactly what she needed all those years. And I think at this point it was just, a bit of boredom. She really wanted to have a different experiences. And that happens when we're just repeating the same pattern over and over again for our learning. The soul had been learning about compassion. And so this was, from my understanding of how it went, was this was a first tier. It was like an entry level for her. It was an entry level of having the experience of speaking her truth and speaking up for herself in a defending, always defensive way. And of course, if you do this long enough, things can really escalate to a level of toxicity. And she admitted that it most certainly had gotten to that level at times. And so the next level of the next tier from there was a not just one jump, but it was multiple jumps higher. And of course, higher doesn't necessarily mean upward. It's we're always referring to going deeper within ourselves. Deeper is the higher. Just want to point that out. If ever I'm talking and going higher, I just want people to understand what I'm really referring to. It's really more in, deep, deep, deep in is what's higher. Um, was that she was absolutely free to continue to go about her business with not being triggered nearly as much and in the same ways because she was ready. She just needed to find out that she was ready, which is what she discovered when we were working together. That if she invoked uh, help by asking, which was a weakness that she had, the ability to ask for help, which is the case for many of us. Um, all she had to do was ask for help, and she would be lifted and have a much more free experience of herself. And it was also um, come to light that she's only ever speaking to herself whenever she's talking to anybody because the external world is mirroring her. So even people outside of her family or other family members other than her husband and her husband, she was reminded in the session through her higher self that she's actually only speaking to herself. And if she remembers this, she'll find it a lot easier to express herself and communicate. And you could just see her lighting up. You could just hear, you could tell that this is exactly what she needed to be telling herself through her higher consciousness, using her intuitive mind. Like she was really ready for this information. And so was I. I was like, yeah, go. Yeah, this is great. I mean, when I look back at the video, I was just like, my face was like glued to the screen. It was so intense. I was so enthralled and inspired by her healing experience. And so all she needed to do was remember that she's only ever actually talking to herself. And if she remembers this, she will speak more freely. And of course, I did some exercises with her based on my background. I helped her, marry the brain with the heart and honeymoon into the gut. There's this whole protocol that I do that I was helping her with that. And I was receiving the guidance from higher self to facilitate in that brief moment. And you could just see her transforming. It was just like she got get out of jail, a free pass to get out of jail card, like you see on the Monopoly games. She was just so buoyant, and there was just so much lightness in her. I mean, already a beautiful woman shining from within and spoke very softly and eloquently and just a beautiful speaker, really. I was so blessed to be able to work with her yesterday. And that if this were true, that she is actually only speaking to herself, even when she's feeling low or less than, she can ask for help in asking for help. And this was a novel idea for her. She thought, "Oh, wow, I can call myself out and ask myself for help. Ask for help when I'm having a hard time asking for help." And of course, that sparked a memory within me that I had just had that morning prior to our session in the afternoon. And I told her the story how I kind of lost it at bedtime with my granddaughter a little bit. My 7-year-old, soon to be 8 granddaughter, she was sleeping over. And I mean, my body had had enough. And you know how children get sometimes they get a little bit more excited towards bedtime. They have their own reasons, lots of little reasons for that. Anyway, I was quite tired and I just kind of just turned around and said, figure it out. And you could see my granddaughter's eyes just going back and forth like, okay, you're the lady that walked behind me in the dollar store with a basket and literally let me put anything in that basket my little eyes and hands placed themselves upon and has not said no to me in the last, 4 hours. And now you're harshly telling me to figure it out because I was basically saying, you have everything in the bed here, you have everything you need. We've done 5 stories, you're good, but I can't sleep, Nana. Well, figure it out. And I was quite firm. So I was sharing this story with her, and we were both laughing because she had been there. But what the story was really, what I really wanted to drive home with the idea of, ask for help when you don't have the energy to ask for help, because it takes energy to ask for help. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. And so driving home after dropping off my granddaughter, just before our Zoom session, um, I was I was doing the work. I was forgiving myself for letting myself get that tired that my own inner child had to act out, that I wasn't giving my own inner child enough acknowledgement, and I was just pushing it too much, and sort of disappearing in the experience with my granddaughter. I wasn't present with my inner child while I was with her, and the body was tired, and the body she did like a little body slam while I was in the bed, and this inner child just came out and like that's enough. And so I was speaking to that part of me, and I apologized to it, and I said, I'm sorry I let things get so long, so far gone that it exasperated you, and please forgive me. And then I, generally was forgiving myself and telling myself that that was okay to act out like that. Nanas aren't perfect, and they get tired, and we're real people too. And so I was doing that groundwork on the way home, and I actually was feeling so much better, much more at peace. And but I wasn't quite up there as high as I was the day before with some personal work I was working on with affirmations, and I was really feeling shifted and elevated and very empowered with what I was working on in that moment. And it just carried me the whole day. And I wanted to be back there. So I said, I'm not really feeling that great about myself right now. I'm doing my work to forgive myself. But before I got out of the car, to come into the house to meet with my client on Zoom, I said, I know you have unconditional love for me. I know you can get me to that level. And so I'm just like, I know I deserve to be at that level, but I need help getting there again. And I don't know how to do that right now, but I know you do. And I just literally surrendered in that moment. And with also the acknowledgement that if I need to be here and not as high as I was yesterday, that's totally fine because I know I'll get there again. And I mentioned this in the last video. I don't chase feeling good. Like I'm not addicted to feeling good. I'm more in the joy of working on myself while I work on myself. That feeds me more. When I get expanded and feeling good, then it's a byproduct, it's a reward, it's great, but I never expect to stay there for long. And when I'm there for longer periods than other times, I'm always very, very grateful, and I just use it to help myself feel more grateful. So I was acknowledging that I'm already feeling better. If you can help me get a little bit better, and by the way, yesterday was amazing. So if you can get me there again, that would be great. Well, so here I am. I get into the house, and all of a sudden, I am just like feeling so powered and uplifted and in so much levity. Not exactly like the day before, because it was a completely different subject matter as well. So I know that I can't compare it. But I really felt ready to give. I really felt ready to give as a good listener, and I felt on point, and so I was able to start the Zoom, and I just felt like an absolute beautiful reset. So I couldn't help myself. Of course, it's not as lengthy as an explanation that I'm giving you now, for the purpose of our togetherness. But I did share with her how she could take that a little bit further with what the higher self was saying, as a real life experience, what I had done with something similar to that, and that it was going to be okay, uh, regardless. So moving on with the story. Um, the higher self was also, because I have to be good at asking questions and getting accountability for the information that's coming through. And I'm channeling a little bit also through the higher self how to get confirmation with what was just being said and just get the clarity that's already coming in even more clear. And and so she's connecting her dots. I'm picking up on a bit of both. I'm not really sure, but the intuition's coming through to ask the next question. And the deeper information that came through was, she was going to have to understand that as she starts to speak her truth, not every day, it's not always going to be nice. That to come from a place of integrity, it's not always comfortable. And sometimes the information has to be expressed with some degree of frustration or curtness. But because she doesn't have an ounce of narcissism in her, or just a super natural, kind, and loving person anyway. And I don't mean in a walkover, lying there like a rug type of personality. No, absolutely not like that at all. But she just does have this heart energy within her naturally, and the higher self was saying you really don't need to worry, but when you are getting started on this, it is okay to not be in the greatest place. And it was even giving examples of how to speak from a heart-centered place. And it was basically, you know, I'm about to say something that's going to be uncomfortable for both of us. And but if I don't say it, it's really not going to be good for either one of us, especially me. And I need to honor this right now. And you need to hear this. So here it goes. I mean, and then say it in whatever. So by the time you're setting it up like that, things will diffuse and calm down. And of course, I'm telling the story through me and not exactly how eloquently the higher self was giving the information, because the higher self speaks in one or two words and then I've got to tease it out, I've got to tease it out and get more of the conversation going. So the divine masculine can be the interpreter and the communicator of what the divine feminine is saying, which is the higher version of the ego. So I'm just watching her, speak from the divine masculine and directly as from the divine feminine. And I'm in the middle there, like just helping it all get teased out properly so that there's more cohesion in the conversation and more deeper understanding. And it just was really beautiful. And basically, the higher self was saying, you need to be okay with allowing your expressions to come. They may not feel convenient uh, to your fear patterns of disappointing people. They may not feel, uh, you may fear that they're not going to come out very nicely, but sometimes things need to be said, not just out of divine timing, but with certain tones and pitches, and not to fear that because they're going to be there helping her. her guides and the higher self, the we. And so, of course, I was helping uh, with more accountability of that information that was coming through in the session because I was, I'm always curious too for my understanding and my learning. And so that really was driven home for her. That really that really drove home for her. It gave her a permission slip. It really freed her up, and I was just so happy for her liberation. And then, of course, the patterns and the fears were there's an exercise that was done where this was removed, and it was just the most beautiful, beautiful, beautiful experience she had that had the privilege to witness and facilitate where it was my place and to recede where I was not needed. So it was just absolutely beautiful. And it's just another message about how important our natural feelings are. And I just thought it was amazing that Jesus would come in that morning and speak to me in that way because um, I have a history of the same kinds of things, and I was really, really blessed. So I kind of knew what was coming down the pipeline already, and it gave me a chance to integrate the wisdom and the knowledge before I was ready for the client. So I felt like I was being attuned to what was coming and what the client would be bringing for the liberation of freedom for the both of us. So I thank that client very much. I watched the whole video after and I contacted her and I told her how beautiful that was and how grateful I was to be invited into her sacred space. And just to drive home how important it is for us to express our natural feelings. I said it in the last video, it is a technology. It does bring everything online. It's very, very important. And I'll probably talk more. And if there's more examples that are meant to come up, I will share them. Otherwise, I'm not sure what the next subject will be. We'll see. But feel those feelings, people. Feel those feelings. I hope this has been helpful to someone out there. And remember, I love you.